There's a whole generation of folks who remember both rotary phones and the first iPhone launch, and psychologists can't quite figure out where to place them. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you're on the tail end of Gen X, but you're barely a millennial, even though everyone keeps trying to force you into one of those boxes. You're what researchers began calling a Xennial around 2014, and some sociologists have even labeled this group a microgeneration because the window is so narrow. What occurred during that specific slice of history created something that's genuinely worth examining. So today, we're going to explore what makes them fascinating from a psychological perspective. From the beginning, you spent your childhood in an analog world where boredom was merely something you sat with, where you had to physically remember phone numbers. And not to mention the panic if you missed your favorite TV show, it was just gone. Yet one day, right as you were entering into adulthood, the entire world turned digital. Not gradually, abruptly. The timing of this transition had consequences that are still playing out. Most generations grow up entirely in one technology paradigm or another. Xennials, however, navigated both of these life-defining experiences during the years when you were still finding yourself. Your late teens looked vastly different from your 20s, and the gap in age was much wider than most generations experience. Think about the implications of this on your daily life. Remember how much of your teens were spent passing paper notes in class or having conversations that vanished into thin air or making plans where you weren't able to text running late or where are you? You just showed up and hoped your friends would be there. That required a totally different kind of trust and commitment than what is present now. But then you were in your 20s and watched everyone get cell phones. You signed up for Friendster, then MySpace, and then Facebook. Prior to social media, most people only had three primary ways to contact someone, either their home or work phone or just by showing up at their house. Then suddenly, you have 17 different messaging apps, and you just figured it out. During your formative years, you experienced both worlds. According to research on brain development, the prefrontal cortex, the region that governs our ability to adjust to new situations and learn complex skills, is still maturing until around the age of 25. A study published in Nature Neuroscience found that this region develops well into the 20s. This means that Xennials were still in this high plasticity period when the technological landscape went through a total overhaul. You were young enough that picking up new technology seemed natural, but old enough to remember what came just before it. Because they were adults when technology first appeared, Gen Xers can sometimes be a bit dubious of technology. Millennials, particularly the younger ones, have no actual memory of life without the internet. If you're a Xennial, though, you've lived through both things, which has created a kind of bilingualism that is quite rare. You can have a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every 30 seconds, but you also don't get nervous about learning new software. You remember what it felt like to be truly unreachable for hours at a time, which is an experience a lot of younger people just do not have. But you're also not frightened by technology the way some older generations are, and this manifests in ways you might not even notice. Like you probably have a distinct relationship with privacy compared to other generations. You grew up in a world where your embarrassing moments just blurred into memory instead of living forever on social media. That 7th grade haircut, that breakup, that wild night at a party. There's no photo evidence. It just exists in the stories people tell. This creates a profoundly different relationship with your past. Your memories could evolve, could become stories, could alter shape over time the way human memory naturally works. You weren't confined by documentation. Research on autobiographical memory indicates that the way we store and recall personal experiences is really quite fluid. Our brains are designed to revise memories, retain what matters, and let the rest fade. When everything is forever documented and searchable, that natural process becomes complicated in ways we're still trying to understand. But here's where things become messy. You also joined the job market right around the 2008 economic crisis, which means a lot of you experienced significant financial instability during the precise years when you were supposed to be building your careers. That timing counts more than people realize. Research on economic adversity shows that economic trauma during this life stage can have enduring psychological effects. People who experience job loss or financial instability during this life stage often bring those experiences forward even after their circumstances improve. It molds how you think about money, security, and risk in ways that don't simply go away. So, you've got this generation that learned to manage huge technological change, but also got financially burned right when you were trying to establish stability. You can navigate change because you had to, but you might also have this underlying thought of, what if it all collapses, again running through your decision-making? And nobody really talks about this combination. The societal conversation about generations tends to pit Gen X against Millennials, as if everyone born after 1965 and before 2000 is essentially the same. But the particular years you were born in, especially during periods of rapid change, create distinct experiences that don't fit into those wide categories. Xennials navigate a paradox that's frankly quite unusual. You have the independence and skepticism of Gen X because you grew up before helicopter parenting became normal. Your parents probably didn't know where you were for hours at a time, and that was just standard. You learned to resolve problems on your own, to amuse yourself, to deal with boredom and frustration without instant adult intervention. However, you also attained adulthood during the early days of the internet, when technology was still thought to connect everyone and fix everything, before we all realized that it might be potentially making some things more complicated. It is strange to find yourself there, independent and cooperative, skeptical yet optimistic, digital but analog. What seems to characterize Xennials is this ability to hold contradictions without it feeling strange. You remember the before and the after, which means you're able to see what was gained and what was sacrificed. Perhaps you're not as nostalgic for the past in the same way Gen X might be, since you truly appreciate modern conveniences too. However, unlike many of the younger generations, you still acknowledge what we gave up. You lost the ability to be truly alone with your thoughts without trying. You lost the patience that comes from waiting. You lost a certain kind of presence that existed when there wasn't always something else vying for your attention. But you gained connection, information, and possibilities your younger self could never have imagined. If you're a Xennial, you probably feel like you don't quite belong anywhere, too young for some things and too old for some, caught between two worlds. It's not a fault. That's actually the core feature of your generation's experience. In a world that keeps shifting faster than anyone can predict, having lived through one major transition might be one of the most crucial things you could have learned. You've adapted to a transitional existence. The environment in which you were raised doesn't necessarily have to be the one in which you reside forever. The Xennial experience is worth understanding because of that more than anything. Not because you're special in a superior way, but because you lived through a specific moment in history that taught you something the rest of us are still attempting to figure out: how to adapt without losing your identity in the process. If this resonated with you, I'd really appreciate you hitting subscribe. And if you want to help me continue making content like this, consider becoming a channel member. Your support truly means a lot. I've got some other videos lined up that I think you'll connect with. Different topics, but a similar kind of depth. I'll see you in the next one.